Ever feel like you're navigating life without a really reliable map?
Yeah, happens to the best of us.
Well, imagine a book so insightful, it's basically been a compass for millions, people seeking a genuinely meaningful, effective way to live. Not just, quick wins, but a deeply centered human experience.
You must be talking about The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Exactly. It's still incredibly relevant, even after all these years.
It truly is remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah.
How a book from, what, a quarter century ago still resonates so strongly. It taps into something really fundamental about effectiveness, kind of regardless of the latest trends.
Totally. And for you listening in, especially if you want to grasp the core of important stuff quickly and have those aha moments without feeling totally overwhelmed, well, that's exactly what we're doing today.
We're diving deep into the timeless wisdom of the 7 Habits.
Yeah, we'll be looking at the key principles from the book, even pulling from some pretty powerful endorsements. People like Captain John Scanlon II, Joel Scholes, Admiral Vern Clark.
Fred Reichheld, Rebecca Merrill, too. Their perspectives are so diverse, but they all seem to land on how universally applicable these habits are. It's quite telling.
It really is. So our mission today, it isn't just to summarize, it's to pull out those core effectiveness principles Stephen Covey laid down and really get why they still hit home, in our lives, our work.
Think of it as your express route to the crucial insights.
Okay, let's get into it then.
Right. So what strikes me immediately looking at those endorsements is the sheer impact they describe. They don't just say it's a good book. They call it a breakthrough.
A breakthrough, wow.
Yeah, Joel Scholes talks about a fundamental shift in his thinking and behavior. Said it made him a better person, better coach. That direct link between understanding the principles and seeing real, tangible improvement is fascinating.
Absolutely. And Captain John Scanlon II, he makes a really interesting point about connecting individual wisdom with the bigger picture, like organizational culture, building trust for good governance.
So it's not just personal self-help, it scales up.
Exactly. It's about how we function effectively together.
And then you have Admiral Vern Clark saying the lessons are even more meaningful today. That really speaks volumes about its staying power, doesn't it?
It does. Plus, someone like Fred Reichheld, who apparently rarely endorses self-help books, he gives it a perfect score, a strong recommendation. That's pretty compelling.
Hard to ignore that.
Definitely. But Rebecca Merrill's description, calling it a roadmap for a principled-centered human experience, that really resonated, especially highlighting that quote. What was it? Whenever you see the problem out there, that is the problem.
Ooh, yeah. That's a punchy one.
It is such a reminder that often the key to fixing external stuff lies in our own internal perspective,
Exactly. And well, this leads us straight into a really central idea in the book. The difference between what Covey calls the personality ethic and the character ethic.
Ah, yes, this distinction.
He argues we've become maybe overly focused on the personality ethic, those surface level techniques, making a good impression, influencing others, that kind of thing.
Right, the quick fixes, like how to have a winning smile or use persuasive communication trick. It's about the image, the projection, often without much substance underneath.
Precisely. Whereas the character ethic, that goes much deeper. It's built on foundational principles, things like integrity, honesty, humility, courage, real bedrock stuff.
So it's about developing who you are at your core.
Yes. Believing that genuine effectiveness, the lasting kind, grows from strong character, not just outward charm or technique.
The book has that great little story, doesn't it? About the dad trying to pump up his kid for baseball.
Oh yeah, the pep talk.
All the rah-rah speeches, the swing tips, pure personality ethic. But if the kid hasn't actually put in the practice, developed the underlying skills and disciplined the character, essentially the pep talk just falls flat.
It really highlights the limits of trying to fix things only on the surface. That's a perfect analogy. The personality ethic often gives us these catchy slogans, think positive, or sometimes even, manipulative strategies. But the character ethic is about cultivating genuine motives, living in line with principles that have stood the test of time.
And it's easy to fall into that trap, isn't it? Seeking the quick fix instead of doing the harder work on character.
So easy. And Covey talks about that aha moment when you suddenly realize how much we're bombarded with this focus on image and technique and how disconnected it can feel from what we truly value deep down.
Yeah, that realization kind of sets the stage for understanding the next big concept, right? Paradigms, our mental maps.
Exactly. These are our ingrained ways of seeing the world, our assumptions about how things are, and maybe how they should be.
Okay, like picture one of those classic optical illusions. Is it an old woman or a young woman? Two people can stare at the exact same drawing.
And see something completely different. That's our paradigms in action. They shape our interpretation based on our conditioning.
So our past experiences, our upbringing, our beliefs, they all build these mental filters.
Precisely. And the really crucial insight here is that we don't see the world as it objectively is. We see it as we are, through our own unique lens.
Which immediately explains so many disagreements, doesn't it? We're often operating from totally different maps, and each
Yeah.
of us thinks our map is the right one, the territory itself.
Exactly right. And this leads to the idea of a paradigm shift, that sudden aha moment when our understanding just fundamentally flips. Covey even references Thomas Kuhn's work on scientific revolutions as an analogy for these personal breakthroughs.
That story in the book about the man on the train, it's unforgettable.
Oh, the one with the rowdy children. Yeah.
You're getting really annoyed, judging the father, and then you find out their mother just died hours ago. Instantly, everything changes.
Your perception, your thoughts, your feelings, your behavior, at a complete 180. It's such a stark illustration of how powerfully our paradigms shape our reality.
And how limited our view can be when we're locked into just one perspective.
Absolutely. It really underscores the importance of, well, being aware of our own paradigm and staying open to the possibility that others might see things differently, and validly so.
So, okay, if our character is the foundation and paradigms are how we see things, how do we actually build that effective life? That's where principle-centered living comes in, I assume.
You got it. The character ethic is fundamentally based on this idea. There are universal principles governing human effectiveness. Think of them like natural laws.
Like gravity, but for people.
Kinda, yeah. They aren't just opinions or cultural trends. They're fundamental truths that consistently lead to positive outcomes when we align with them.
The book uses that battleship story, right? Frank Koch's story.
Oh, the one in the fog, yes, where the captain stubbornly insists the other ship change course.
Only to find out it's a lighthouse. He was demanding an immovable object conform to him, ignoring a fundamental principle of navigation, almost led to disaster.
It perfectly highlights the danger of ignoring these underlying truths, these principles.
So what are some examples of these principles?
Things like fairness, integrity, honesty, human dignity, service, quality, potential. When we consistently try to live by these, we build trust. We foster cooperation. We create a really solid foundation for lasting success.
Makes sense. But this kind of growth, aligning with principles, it doesn't happen instantly, does it? Covey talks about a continuum.
The maturity continuum, yes. It's a natural progression. We start independence, relying on others. Then we strive for independence, self-reliance, taking responsibility. And finally, the highest level is interdependence, working effectively with others for shared goals.
Like learning to walk. You crawl, then walk, then run, can't skip steps.
Exactly. You can't shortcut that development. And the book structures the habits along this path. The first three habits, be proactive, begin with the end in mind. Put first things first. They're about achieving private victories.
Self-mastery, moving from dependence to independence.
Right. And those have to come before the public victories, habits 4, 5, and 6, which are about teamwork, cooperation, communication, achieving interdependence.
It's that inside-out approach he emphasizes.
Precisely. Character growth, the private victory, has to precede outward success in relationships and teamwork, the public victory.
Okay, so you can't expect great teamwork if the individuals involved haven't mastered themselves first. That clicks. Now, another key principle, the PTC balance. What's that about?
This is such an insightful concept. It's perfectly captured by Aesop's fable, The Goose and the Golden Egg.
Right, the farmer gets greedy.
He wants more eggs. Now that's P for production. So he kills the goose, the PC, production capability. And in doing so, he destroys the very source of the results he wanted.
And we do that metaphorically all the time, don't we? Burn ourselves out for short-term results or damage relationships for a quick win.
Exactly. P is the desired result, the golden eggs. PC is the asset, the ability, the goose that produces those results. We need both in balance for sustainable effectiveness.
Covey applies this to different kinds of assets.
Yeah, physical assets, like maintaining your lawnmower so it keeps cutting the grass. Financial assets, not spending the principal, only the interest. And crucially, human assets.
Our health, our skills, our relationships.
Right. Neglect your health, PC, and your energy and productivity, deal drop. Neglect relationships, PC, and trust and cooperation, P, erode.
The book has that nice little story about the father taking his daughter to say Star Wars, even though he wasn't keen.
Yes.
That
That's a perfect example of investing in the PC, the relationship bank account, rather than just focusing on his own immediate preference, the P.
And with people, especially like in a work context, Covey makes that point about buying hands but not hearts or minds.
Crucial point. You can pay for someone's time and basic labor, their hands, but you can't buy their enthusiasm, their creativity, their loyalty, their heart and mind. That comes from nurturing the PC, treating people as valuable partners, as volunteers in a sense.
Okay, this is great foundational stuff. Let's dive into the habits themselves now. Habit 1, be proactive.
Right. And this one is powerfully framed by Viktor Frankl's experiences, in the Nazi concentration camps.
Incredible story of resilience.
Amidst unimaginable suffering and lack of external control, Frankl discovered what he called the last of the human freedoms.
Earth was.
The freedom to choose his own response, to choose his attitude, his inner state, regardless of the external stimulus. That space between stimulus and response is where our power lies.
So proactivity isn't just about like taking initiative or being busy.
No, it's much deeper. It's fundamentally about recognizing that we are responsible for our own lives. We can choose our actions based on our values rather than being driven purely by feelings or circumstances.
Acting, not being acted upon.
Exactly. The opposite is reactivity, blaming circumstances, other people, feeling like a victim. Think of Bill Gates seeing the potential of the PV early on that was proactive vision and action.
And Covey uses those circles, right? Circle of concern, circle of influence.
Yes, very helpful model. The circle of concern includes all the things we worry about, the economy, politics, other people's behavior, things we often can't directly control.
And the circle of influence.
That contains the things we can do something about. Our habits, our skills, our choices, how we treat others. Proactive people focus their energy and effort inside their circle of influence.
Makes sense. If you focus on what you can't control, you just feel helpless.
Precisely. Reactive people get bogged down in the circle of concern, often leading to blaming and negativity. Proactive people work on the things they can change, and interestingly, their circle of influence often expands as a result.
Like that advice in the book, Love Your Wife. Not as a feeling, but as a verb. An action you choose.
Beautiful illustration of proactivity. It's a choice, rooted in value, not just a fluctuating emotion. And the story of Joseph in Egypt focusing on his character, his service, his influence, despite being sold into slavery, another powerful example.
It's also important to remember, though, that while we choose our actions within our influence,
the consequences often fall outside it, governed by natural principles or laws. We choose the action, but we don't always choose the consequence. That's part of being proactive, too, acknowledging reality.
Okay, habit 1, be proactive. Got it. What about habit 2? Begin with the end in mind.
This one starts with a pretty confronting exercise, doesn't it?
The funeral visualization. Yeah. Imagine attending your own funeral. What would you want people to say about you? Your spouse, your kids, your colleagues, your friends.
It forces you to connect with your deepest, most fundamental values. What really matters in the grand scheme of things. Joseph Addison, reflecting on the tombs of the great, kind of echoes that same thought, what endures beyond the day-to-day.
So the core idea is having a clear destination before you start the journey.
Exactly. Covey says all things are created twice. First, there's the mental creation, the plan, the vision, the blueprint. Then there's the physical creation, the actual building, the action, the result.
Like building a house. You need the architect's plan before the builders start laying bricks.
Precisely. And habit 2 is about taking control of that first creation. So often we live our lives based on scripts handed to us by parents, by society, by circumstances, by other people's agendas.
We're living out someone else's first creation for us.
Right. Habit 2 is about becoming your own first creator. Writing your own script based on your own deeply held values and principles.
This is where leadership comes in, right? Versus management.
Yes, a crucial distinction Covey makes. Leadership. Habit 2 is about deciding what the first things are. What's truly important? What direction should we be heading? Management, which is habit 3, is about the efficiency of climbing the ladder. Leadership is determining if the ladder is leaning against the right wall.
Okay. And a key tool for this first creation is the personal mission statement.
Yes. It's like a personal constitution. A written standard and expression of your vision and values, that becomes the criterion by which you measure everything else.
The book gives examples like balancing career and family, being a responsible citizen, financial independence. It can cover different life areas.
It can, and it helps you identify your center. Covey discusses how we can be centered on many different things: spouse, family, money, work, possessions, pleasure, even enemies.
But all those centers are inherently unstable, aren't they? They depend on external factors or other people's behavior.
Exactly. They make us vulnerable. If your center is your spouse, what happens if the relationship struggles? If it's money, what happens in an economic downturn?
So the book advocates for a principle center.
Right. Centering your life on timeless, unchanging principles like fairness, integrity, contribution. That provides a solid, stable, unchanging core. It gives you a compass regardless of the changing conditions around you.
That connects back to Frankl's idea, too, that we sort of detect our mission in life rather than just inventing it from scratch.
It does. It suggests there are purposes aligned with those core principles waiting to be discovered. And thinking about having limited time like that, what if you had 6 months to live? Scenario often clarifies that love, contribution, relationships based on principles become central.
So how do you embed this mission? Affirmations, visualization.
Those can be powerful tools for rescripting, for reinforcing the first creation. Affirmations should be personal, positive, present tense, visual, and emotional. Visualization involves vividly imagining yourself living out your mission.
But they need to be rooted in something real, right? Not just wishful thinking.
Absolutely. Covey stresses they are most powerful when they flow from a well-thought-out purpose and are aligned with correct principles. Otherwise, it's just psyching yourself up without a solid foundation.
And organizing the mission statement around different life roles like parent, spouse, professional, friend, that helps create balance.
Yes, it prevents you from becoming solely defined by one area, like work, and helps ensure you're defining success holistically across the important roles in your life.
What about families or organizations? Can they have mission statements?
Definitely. A family mission statement can be incredibly powerful for creating a shared vision and values, guiding decisions, and parenting. And for organizations, think about that hotel example in the book.
Oh yeah, where the mission statement wasn't just a plaque on the wall.
Exactly. It was developed collaboratively by everyone at every level, and it permeated everything they did: hiring, training, customer service, problem solving. It was alive, a shared first creation that drove their success.
Wow. Okay, so that leads us logically from defining the end, habit 2, to actually getting there. Habit 3, put first things first.
This is the second creation, the physical creation. It's the practical fulfillment of habits 1 and 2. It's about discipline, execution, self-management.
Integrity, really. Walking your talk, doing what you said you value.
Precisely. If habit 1 says you are the programmer and habit 2 says write the program, then habit 3 says run the program. This is where leadership, deciding what's first, meets management, putting it first.
And the key tool here is the time management matrix.
Yes, the famous 4 quadrants based on urgency and importance. Quadrant 1 is urgent and important crises, deadlines. Quadrant 3 is urgent but not important interruptions, some meetings.
Right.
Quadrant 4 is not urgent and not important busy work, time wasters.
But the magic happens in quadrant 2, right?
Exactly. Quadrant 2 is not urgent but important. This is where true effectiveness lies. Activities like prevention, relationship building, planning, learning, exercise, recreation.
The stuff that builds our capacity, PC, but doesn't usually scream for immediate attention.
Right. Most people spend too much time in quadrants of 3rd and 3, constantly reacting to urgency. Effective people proactively carve out time for quadrant 2, understanding that investing here reduces the number of crises, quadrant 1, down the road.
So quadrant 2 is the heart of effective personal management.
It really is. And the focus shifts from daily planning to weekly organizing, looking at the week ahead through the lens of your roles and goals from habit 2, and scheduling time for those crucial quadrant 2 activities.
Making appointments with yourself for the important stuff.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Translating roles and goals into specific actions you schedule. Another key part of habit 3 is effective delegation.
Because you can't do everything yourself if you want to focus on quadrant 2.
Correct. But Covey differentiates between 2 types. There's gopher delegation, basically telling someone exactly what to do and how to do it. Micromanagement.
Which isn't very empowering or efficient.
Not at all. The better way is stewardship delegation. This focuses on results instead of methods. You empower the other person, giving them ownership.
How does that work? What does it involve?
It requires clear, upfront understanding and commitment in 5 areas. First, desired results, what needs to be accomplished. Second, guidelines, what are the parameters or rules. Third, resources, what support is available. Fourth, accountability, how will performance be measured. And fifth, consequence is what happens, good or bad, as a result of the evaluation.
That sounds much more thorough and respectful.
It is. The detailed anecdote about training his 7-year-old son to take care of the yard using stewardship delegation is a fantastic illustration. It took time up front, but the payoff in terms of the son's responsibility and the quality of the work, plus the father's freed up time, was huge.
So it's an investment in the other person's PC as well.
Absolutely. It builds their capability. Ultimately, habit 3, putting first things first, is driven by that quadrant 2 paradigm, seeing everything through the lens of importance, not just urgency. It requires discipline and the willpower to subordinate feelings and impulses to your deeper values and goals.
Okay, wow. We've covered a lot of ground there. The foundational principles, the first 3 habits, focusing on that private victory.
Yeah, so just to recap a bit, we've seen that true effectiveness really stems from building character, basing our lives on principles, understanding our own paradigms or mental maps.
And then taking proactive responsibility for our lives, defining clearly what matters most by beginning with the end in mind, and finally, having the discipline to put those important things first, day in and day out.
Exactly. It's that inside-out sequence.
And for you listening, we really hope this deep dive has given you a clear pathway to understanding these powerful ideas. Maybe sparked some of those aha moments Covey talks about, offering a framework that feels empowering rather than overwhelming.
Which leads us to maybe a final thought for you to chew on. Consider which of these principles, or maybe which of these first 3 habits, resonates most strongly with your current situation, your current challenges.
Yeah, and think about how consciously applying just one of them, maybe starting this week, might shift your perspective, or maybe just change one small action you take.
It's often those small, consistent shifts based on sound principles that lead to the biggest changes over time.
Absolutely. And look, if this has sparked your interest, and how could it not, we definitely encourage you to dive into the full text of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. There's so much more depth and nuance we couldn't cover.
It really is a book worth exploring fully, a journey well worth taking for anyone serious about personal and interpersonal effectiveness.